Trump flew to Beijing with his Treasury Secretary, his Secretary of State, and the chief executives of NVIDIA, Apple, BlackRock, and Goldman Sachs. He reviewed troops at the Great Hall of the People. He walked the Zongnanhai Gardens with Xi Jinping. He sat through a state banquet. And when he boarded Air Force One on Friday, he told reporters it had been an incredible visit with fantastic trade deals for both countries. Read the joint statement, then read it again, because what is not in that document is the entire story. Let me show you what Trump went to Beijing to get, and then show you exactly what he came home with. There were 4 items Washington considered non-negotiable going into this summit: rare earths, AI chips, Taiwan, and the Strait of Hormuz. Every one of them was on the agenda. Not one of them was resolved. Start with rare earths, because this is the card Beijing has been holding over Washington's manufacturing base for 14 months and has never had to play in full. In April 2025, China imposed export licensing requirements on 7 rare earth elements critical to American defense and technology production. The restrictions did not cut off supply completely. They created a choke point, a system where every shipment required individual approval from Beijing. The result was that rare earth export volumes to the United States fell roughly 50% below pre-restriction levels and stayed there even after the Busan trade truce in October. A second wave of controls, which would have extended Chinese licensing authority to any product containing even trace amounts of Chinese-sourced rare earths anywhere in the world, was suspended at Busan until November 2026. That suspension expires in 6 months. When reporters asked Trump about rare earths after his meetings with Xi, his answer was 3 words: "We did not discuss tariffs." Rare earths were not mentioned anywhere in the joint statement. China controls an estimated 70% of the world's supply and roughly 90% of global processing capacity. The United States has committed billions in emergency financing to build domestic alternatives. The CSIS Critical Minerals Security Program assessed in April that the U.S. is still far from true resilience 1 year after the initial restrictions, having committed the capital but lacking refining capacity at scale. Washington needed a commitment on the licensing system. Washington did not get one. Now Taiwan. Xi opened Thursday's formal meeting by calling Taiwan the most important issue in China-U.S. relations. He told Trump that if the issue is mishandled, the 2 nations could collide or even come into conflict, pushing the entire relationship into a highly perilous situation. A congressional arms sale package worth billions was sitting on Trump's desk waiting for his signature. Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that he made no commitment either way. He said he would make a determination. He said the last thing we need right now is a war 9,500 miles away. Taiwan does not appear in the joint statement. China's readout of the summit listed Taiwan as the most important issue discussed. The White House readout did not mention Taiwan at all. 2 governments, 2 readouts, 2 completely different accounts of what the central topic of the meeting was. The Council on Foreign Relations noted after the summit that intelligence assessments suggest Beijing is privately considering arming Iran in its conflict with the United States. Xi asked Trump to pull back on Taiwan arms sales. Trump gave no answer. The CFR's assessment was blunt. Washington may be dialing back arms to Taiwan, while Beijing may be dialing up arms to Iran. Now the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, launched on February 28th, has produced a partial closure of the strait, through which roughly 20% of global crude oil and 40% of China's total oil imports normally flow. Both sides have an obvious economic interest in keeping it open. Trump said he and Xi feel very similar on Iran. He said Xi told him China would not send military equipment to Iran. He called that a big statement. China's readout of the same conversation said the strait should never be subject to transit charges and that Iran should not acquire nuclear weapons. There was no Chinese commitment to actively pressure Tehran. There was no timeline. There was no mechanism. There was vague language, useful in signaling, the CFR analyst noted, but containing no obligation to police stability or provide stability. The joint statement includes a line about the strait. It stops well short of committing Beijing to any action. So here is the full picture of what the summit produced. China agreed to buy 200 Boeing jets. Trump had been hoping for 500. Boeing's CEO was in the room. China agreed to purchase U.S. soybeans, oil, and liquefied natural gas. Xi invited Trump to the White House for a state visit in late September. Both sides agreed to describe their relationship as a constructive China-US relationship of strategic stability and to use that framework for the next 3 years. The Chatham House analysis described it accurately. Xi is using this framework to lock in a truce on terms favorable to Beijing for the next several years and to set a baseline against which future competitive steps could be framed as violations. Beijing thinks in terms of structural positioning. Washington, Chatham noted, takes a transactional and improvisational approach. The rare earth licensing system stays in force. The second wave of controls is still scheduled to hit in November. The Taiwan arms sale is still unsigned. The Hormuz commitment exists only as vague language that China excluded from its own readout. And when asked directly about rare earths, Trump said he did not discuss tariffs. There is one more detail that did not receive significant attention in the post-summit coverage. The fragile détente that began last year started because China exploited its control of the rare earth supply chain. That is not an outside analyst's framing. That is the Council on Foreign Relations assessment of why the trade truce happened at all. Beijing suspended its second wave of controls in exchange for the truce. The truce is still in place. The licensing system that reduces rare earth volumes to 50% of normal is also still in place. China came to this summit holding the same cards it held going in. The rare earth card is still in Beijing's hand. The Taiwan leverage is still in Beijing's hand. The Hormuz commitment is a sentence in a document that China's own readout barely addresses. Trump came home with 200 jets and a September state dinner. The joint statement tells you what was agreed on. What was not in the joint statement tells you who has leverage. And what Trump said about rare earths on the plane home tells you everything else. Read the two readouts side by side, and the asymmetry is hard to ignore. The White House emphasized trade wins and alignment on Iran. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasized Taiwan, the Strait, and the new strategic stability framework Xi introduced. Those are not differences in emphasis. They are two governments describing two different meetings. Xi has put his prestige behind this framework. He wants stable, predictable relations for the next several years, not because he trusts Washington, but because stability buys Beijing time to build. Chatham House framed it directly. Against a U.S. political system that operates in news cycles and swings between elections, even modest long-term discipline is advantageous on China's side. Trump called it fantastic. Xi called it historic. The 4 problems Trump flew to Beijing to solve are the same 4 problems he flew home with. They are just wrapped in a joint statement that both sides can read however they need to